more sick psychopaths do not get pleasure of killing other people.
That sounds good, baby.
We're gonna go down in history. We're gonna be just like Scream, except real life terms.
So that was largely what Tori brought into my life, was that movie Scream. I remember that I went to his house and he had this extensive DVD collection. I was like blown away by it because I thought it was really interesting. He had all these DVDs, and so basically we started talking about Scream, and then we started talking about other movies, and then like the whole like Scream thing was just kind of what we talked about, but it was more just like two kids and their favorite movie. It wasn't anything that was serious or weird until like the very end of our friendship out there.
That
We're gonna be
sounds
murderers.
good, baby.
Like, let's see, Ted Bundy, like the Hillside Strangler, the Zodiac Killer.
Most people are more amateurs compared to what we're gonna be.
Just killed Cassie. We just left her house. This is not a fucking joke.
I'm sick.
I stabbed her in the throat and I saw her lifeless body just disappear. Dude, I just killed Cassie.
The clip you've just seen is taken from a series of homemade videos recorded by two 16-year-old killers. Just moments before the camera started rolling, they brutally murdered their friend and classmate, 16-year-old Cassie Stoddart.
Oh, hello, Cassie. I'm getting you on tape, okay? Say hi, please. Okay, see ya.
Brian Draper, one half of the infamous murder duo from Pocatello, Idaho, now 33 years old, is serving a life sentence for his crimes and has agreed to an exclusive interview with EWU. While Tori Adamczyk, the other half of the duo, never responded to our queries, Brian was willing to speak with us in an exclusive interview 17 years after Cassie's murder.
I would love the opportunity to experience life in society again when I lost everything, and I hate that like another person had to lose their life, but it's created a person in me that I never thought I could ever achieve. And I really hope that I'm going to be in prison for the rest of my life. I really hope that at the end of my life I can say, hey man, I did something horrible when I was 16 years old, but I tried as hard as I could for as long as I could to live a good life.
The following interview has been analyzed by a qualified team, including a licensed professional counselor and a former detective, former licensed polygraph examiner, and former hostage negotiation commander and instructor. To get Brian comfortable talking to us, we started with the basics of his background, asking him about his early childhood and how he ended up living in Pocatello.
Basically, I grew up in white Mormon suburbia. I live in Sandy, Utah, and then I moved to Pocatello, Idaho when I believe I was 12 when we moved there. I lived an extremely sheltered life, and I was very limited in my experiences and all of that. So I grew up, and I was very I've always been a very private person. I enjoy my privacy. I enjoy being alone, but I had a really good childhood. I mean, I had good parents. My dad was always gone though. I was a kid, and so I didn't really have a good father figure growing up. It's not that my dad wasn't a good dad. He was a great dad, and I love him, but he was always gone. And so I was largely raised by just my mother, and she was busy all the time and stretched thin, so I was largely like a latchkey kid, I believe is what they call it. Kind of came home, I was alone, I kind of ate alone, and so that's kind of how my life was growing up. But we moved to Pocatello when I was 12 or 13, and I think the transition into junior high school and high school is where things started to kind of fall apart, and it really exposed all of the gaps I had in my development and all my vulnerabilities. I think that's what really did it, is when you're a kid, you're unlike elementary school, everything is very easy and simple, and as you get older, things get a lot more complicated as your social network gets more complicated, and it really tore me apart, and it kind of exposed all my difficulties and my vulnerabilities as I got older. I think that's largely how it started, is just that transition into adolescence.
We asked Brian what his relationship with his parents was like.
I mean, my mother is extremely affectionate, and she taught me to be affectionate as well, and she's very kind, and everyone who meets her absolutely adores her, and I love her to death, man. She's awesome. She's a great person, but I think she was busy all the time. She was stressed out, and so but I don't want to speak ill of my mother, because I love my mother with all my heart, and she did the best she could, but there's lots of things that I could have learned and things that she could have done differently, but that's every parent, right? I think that largely treated right. And I was actually adopted, but I was adopted at birth. And so the Draper family has always been like my family. The highlight of my childhood is when my dad came home. I was able to hang out with him. So, but yeah, that's my mom and dad were. They always fought. They were never really affectionate with each other. They tried, but yeah. And my sister, I have a sister who's she's 30 now. Her name's Tiffany. She was like 12 when I was arrested, so she's really growing up. But we were really close, and I love my sister. And the commonplace stuff of kids and their siblings fighting and arguing is it's pretty normal stuff.
Brian is quick to mention an absent father and describes his mother as doing the best she could, even though she made mistakes. This may mean that he's trying to appear as though he's not blaming his parents, while at the same time leaving us to draw our own conclusions that they created an environment leading to him being too sheltered. It's possible that in his mind this is true, or it could be seen as an attempt at manipulation. What Brian says here about his sister Tiffany eerily echoes what Andrew Stoddard said about his sister Cassie in an interview given in 2016. He stated, "Me and her were always into the same stuff and going to the same places. We did everything together even though we would argue and stuff, just like any other sibling. I just miss having my sister right there, a grade above me. I felt like I was always a step behind her looking up to her. She really was a role model. She was really smart, doing good, and had a lot going for her." We asked Brian if he always knew he was adopted.
No, I didn't. So basically when I was 10 years old, my mom actually took me out to lunch and she told me that I came from a different mommy, is how she said it. And so I didn't even know what that meant exactly. She said that while I was in heaven, I chose her instead of my biological mother. And so I thought, okay, so you're my mom. So all I knew about my biological mother was that she was only 13 when she had me, and her name was, and that's all I knew. So basically, when I was arrested, I got this letter from the, and automatically I thought, oh my God, this is her. And we had like a correspondence for a while, and then she disappeared again. But had a very brief relationship with her after I was arrested.
Our next questions delved into how Brian met Tori and their relationship. Notice how Brian references Cassie in this section, as it's the one and only time he refers to her specifically in this interview.
So I only met Tori. I knew Tori for a couple months, basically. So that's at the very end of my time on the outside is when I met Tori. So I met him. It was sophomore year in high school biology class, and it was fifth hour. And I wasn't his friend at first. When I first met him, I didn't like him. He was very arrogant, and I thought he was like a popular kid, so I didn't really have a connection to him at first, and he was mean. Ironically enough, he was mean to me, so we didn't have a connection for the first, half of that year. What brought us together was we had an assignment in biology class, and we were assigned into groups, and the greatest irony of all of this, I think, is that I was assigned to a table with my victim and with Tori at the same time, and we were all like friends, and that's how we became friends. Is we all started talking to each other and like laughing and joking around. So all three of us, and then her friend was there too, and that's how we got a connection.
According to our team, this phrasing, in addition to being an unsettling way to refer to Cassie, is a red flag in that, generally speaking, we tend to refer to the most meaningful people first in a conversation. Here, Brian introduces Cassie as my victim, and then Tori, almost as though he was already seeing Cassie as his victim as far back as that lab assignment. It also completely erases her identity and allows him to distance himself from her as a person. Brian also seems to have a hard time keeping his answers straight and often provides contradictory answers. For example, though he just finished explaining how he initially didn't like Tori, he almost immediately goes on to say this.
I don't know what drew me to him immediately. I think it was more just, I kind of felt like he was cool. And when you're a kid, like everything that is important is cool. He was cool. I thought he was cool, how he talked, how he acted, how many movies he had. I just thought he was a cool dude. And I thought he had a whole bunch of friends. He told me he had tons of friends and that he was popular. And so I felt like if I hung out with him, I could be popular. I could be popular at my school. He could get me involved with other people. But after the fact, I realized that was all a lie. Like, he wasn't popular. He didn't have a lot of friends. But He told me he did. I think that's what drew me to him.
He also goes on to clarify that he and Tori didn't discuss anything beyond movies, despite the hours of footage they shot speaking of other interests. It's unclear if Brian has simply forgotten the footage, or if he doesn't know how much was released to the public after the trial.
That's what he got me into movies, and that's all we talked about. That was it. We didn't talk about girls. We didn't talk about our futures. We talked about movies. That was the extent of our friendship.
We're gonna go down in history. We're gonna be just like Scream, except real life terms.
My other network of friends kind of disappeared in a way because I was hanging out with Tori all the time. Like I said, we didn't have intense conversations about life and what we wanted out of life. It was all movies. That was it.
You're evil.
Yes, I am. So are you.
No,
We're
evil
both
is an expression of God. That was another test you failed.
Evil is not an expression of God,
Yes, it is.
and you know it.
Evil, of origin, is a follower of Satan.
There is no Satan.
Real? Then shut up.
Then how are we supposed to express ourselves?
Good and bad.
We're bad.
We're bad.
And that sounds so shitty.
We're evil. That's not even shittier.
We're not, okay? They were sick psychopaths who not get pleasure of killing other people.
That's
Next, we asked him what kind of movies he watched with Tori.
Prior to meeting Tori, I didn't have any DVDs that were horror movies. I didn't have any horror movies because I wasn't allowed to have horror movies. So I didn't have any of that stuff in my house.
Taken shortly after the murder, these crime scene photos of Brian's room show wall-to-wall horror movie posters and a large DVD collection complete with dozens of horror movie titles. Either the statement he just gave is a lie, or he's claiming that in the apparent couple months he hung out with Tori before they murdered Cassie, he amassed this entire collection without his parents knowing.
But he got me into that stuff. I had known about it, as a kid, and I was kind of thought it was cool to watch Friday the 13th. I thought it was cool. I saw it on TV, of course, DVD. But so, I kind of thought they were cool movies. And so but I didn't know anything about Scream or anything. And so that was largely what Tori brought into my life, was that movie Scream. And so I remember that I went to his house and he had this extensive DVD collection. I was blown away by it because I thought it was really interesting. He had all these DVDs. And so basically we started talking about Scream, and then we started talking about other movies. And then the whole Scream thing was just, kind of what we talked about. But it was more just two kids and their favorite movie. It wasn't anything that was, serious or weird until the very end of our friendship out there. So it was, it's all just normal stuff. It gave us a chance to, kind of escape into our own reality, I guess is how it started.
One of the many interesting answers Brian gave us was when we asked him if there were any red flags he was exhibiting that he thought other people could have noticed.
Oh, absolutely. So basically, when I entered my junior year in high school, I completely copied the identity of the Columbine high school shooters. So I copied how they dressed, how they talked, what kind of music they listened to. I started smoking because I wanted to embody that image, because I thought that image would elicit, attention from my classmates. I started wearing a trench coat, and all of these things were very clear that I was dressing differently, I was acting differently. And if you would have gone on chat rooms, I go into chat rooms, and I guess I just I was looking for an identity, and that's the identity I was pushed to through rejection. And so I guess that would be one of them. And then I'd always talk about it. I talked about it online on my MySpace profile, because this was in 2006. I talked about how my heroes were Eric and Dylan. And so when there's a kid who says things like that, he's trying to impress people, and he's trying to show people that, hey, I'm like this too. I'm cool. I'm powerful. I can do something like this too. So, respect me. And I think that all those things came into play, and they weren't talked about, So, but yeah, I could have absolutely, I think. And there's a lot of times where I said really dumb things in class that, I think if one individual would have gone to a school resource officer and said, hey, Brian Draper said these things, I think that would have been enough to scare me straight and be like, what am I doing? I'm getting in serious trouble. This is stupid. But that never happened.
Brian's behavior was reported at least twice. Fellow students at his middle school reported that Brian and another student were planning a school shooting. They advised the school administration that Brian and the other student were obsessed with Columbine and were planning a similar attack. In one of the two reports, Brian was allegedly planning to bring a gun to the next school dance and had even mimicked shooting people at the previous dance. Brian was disciplined and referred for counseling and ended up switching to an alternative school. This is still a remarkable amount of focus on himself and how others could have stopped him from making his choices. While it's typical for teenagers to be more self-involved and narcissistic than other age groups, and while personality disorders are not typically diagnosed until after the age of 18, if certain traits are exaggerated in adolescence, this can be a red flag for a burgeoning personality disorder. Next, we asked why he was obsessed with the Columbine shooters.
I think largely it was trying to get noticed by my peers, and so I think when I entered junior high school and high school, I kind of got swallowed up in the environment where I didn't have a lot of friends, I didn't have a good social network, and I was kind of pushed aside, and that made me frustrated. And I didn't have the social skills to kind of create the life I wanted, so I got frustrated, and so I tried to get noticed, and that's what all it was about. I was trying to get noticed, and that failed. And so I tried all of these things, and I just got pushed, I guess, further and further into the fringes, and that's when I remembered Columbine. I remember hearing about Columbine when I was younger, and I started going online and researching it, and this gave me, it was a very huge, extreme example of what a kid can do at his school to be noticed and be important. And so that's what drew me to it at first, I believe, and then I kind of felt like I was part of a club because I was interested in these things for a reason. I'm part of this club. I'm part of these people. I'm an elite person. I'm strong. I'm powerful. I'm a man. And so I started, dressing like them. I started acting like them because I had no idea who Brian Draper was. And that's, unfortunately, I was pushed into that role, and it's my own fault. And that's why I related to it, is because I felt like they were like me and they understood me when I didn't even know them, and they weren't even people anymore. They were dead. But in my mind, they were real on the screen. And so, I felt like a kinship with them. It's one of those things that makes me frustrated now because of what they did and all the damage they caused. But when you're a kid, you don't really understand about the whole damage you're causing. You just understand it in terms of, is it cool? Can it get me noticed? And that's all you think about. That's it.
The use of statements such as, I'm an elite person, I'm strong, I'm powerful, indicate an obsession with being seen as an elite person, and also aligns with certain aspects of narcissistic personality disorder. Brian mentioned that he and Tori used to break into homes, and we asked him if the purpose of this was to scare people.
No, it was more like we'd go to a house and we'd drive around and we'd film and we would act like we were about to do this huge thing.
Hopefully we don't have to go through and try to use
Yeah. We've probably tried maybe 10 times. They've never been on the road, so.
Well, the parents show up.
As long as we're patient,
We would do that for about 2 weeks. We were doing that. And I think the more we did that, the more crazy it got to where it was, well, how about we go into a house? And so then we actually went into a house once. I'm not going to say whose it was. We went into a house and then we left. We didn't do anything.
And we were patient and never getting paid off because I missed him so long. So we got our plan all worked out now. So
it was like a thing where it was just one step after another where it just became worse and worse and worse, where then all of a sudden we're in this other house and our friends are upstairs and we're in the basement, and then it's, oh my God, like we're actually doing a crime now. It's reality. So
Brian and Tori started with smaller scale crimes that they were easily able to get away with. It's not uncommon that someone will continue to escalate their behavior to test the limits of what they can and cannot get away with, and also as a way to desensitize themselves for bigger, riskier plans. With this in mind, we asked how and when the topic of murdering someone first came up.
Well, it seemed like it was very spontaneous, so we were skipping an assembly in junior year. We were friends over the summer. That's when we became friends, I guess, is during those 3 months. I spent every day with him, all day with him, and I neglected to all my other friends. But so basically, we were skipping an orientation assembly, I believe, in junior year of high school, and we were hiding out in the bathroom because it was a requirement you had to go to it. So we skipped it, and we were hiding out in the bathroom. We were kind of like mimicking, like, you know, the actual movie Scream, and he just, like, out of the blue said, "Brian, have you ever, like, thought about doing something actually, like, real?" At this point in my life, this is a very complicated issue, but at this point in my life, I had been, like, reading about the Columbine High School shooting, and so I had been delving into that. And so when he asked me that, I said, "Yeah, I've thought about Columbine for a while." And so, yeah, I have thought about that. And so that's when it started. And I mean, it goes deeper than that. It goes deeper than that. It's just where I was in the very vulnerable place in my life and so the worst actual possible thing that could have happened to me is meeting Tori. And I'm not blaming it on Tori, but that was the actual tipping point that pushed all of this into reality instead of just stupid adolescent fantasy. It became reality, and that's because we came together at the worst possible time. And so, but that's what happened, and that was probably in August of 2006, I'd say. He just asked me, and then I said, "Yeah, I have thought about it." And then we started going to his house, and we put our own lives into a movie. And so we said, like, who are the characters? And so our characters were our friends. And so our friends were characters in the movie, and our classmates were characters. And that's how it all started, is we took, like, the movie Scream and we put it into our lives. It wasn't really real yet. It was like a fantasy. But that's how it started.
Tori, September 22nd, 2006. Skipping our 4th hour. We're writing our plan right now for tonight. It's gonna be cool. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Cassie's family. She had number one. We have to stick with the plan. She's perfect, so she's gonna die.
Time is 9:50, September 22nd, 2006. Unfortunately, we have the grueling task of killing our 2 friends, and they are right in that house just down the street.
We just talked to them. We were there for an hour. But
We checked out the whole house. We know there's lots of doors. There's lots of places to hide. I unlocked the back doors, so it's all locked. Now we just gotta wait, and we're really nervous right now, but we're ready.
we're listening to the greatest rock band
We've waited for this for a long time.
Floyd, before we commit the ultimate crime of murder.
We waited for this for a long time.
A long time.
On Sunday, September 24th, 2006, the Contreras' 13-year-old daughter walked into the family living room and discovered the bloating and bloodied body of her cousin, Cassie Stoddart. Frank Contreras and his wife Allison, Cassie's uncle and aunt, had left the responsible 16-year-old to house-sit for the weekend and never imagined the horrors that would take place the Friday night they left. Cassie had invited over her boyfriend Matt and 2 friends, Brian and Tori, to watch a movie together, Kill Bill Volume 2. When the boys arrived, they familiarized themselves with the layout of the house. The 4 teens then put on the movie and hung out in the living room until approximately 9:45, when Brian and Tori said they needed to leave. They left a door open and snuck back in, turning the power on and off to try to coax Matt and Cassie to come downstairs. When Matt's mother came to pick him up just a few minutes later, they offered to take Cassie with them. However, she decided to remain at the house to watch over the animals. Tori and Brian, after a prolonged bout of terrorizing Cassie, would don red and white masks and corner her in the Contreras' living room, stabbing her 29 times in the chest and neck.
We just killed Cassie. We just left her house. This is not a f***ing joke.
I'm sick.
I stabbed her in the throat, and I saw her lifeless body just disappear. Dude, I just killed Cassie. Oh. That felt like it wasn't real. I mean, it went by so fast.
Shut the f*** up. We gotta get our act straight.
The 13-year-old cousin who discovered Cassie's body would later develop depression, as did Frank and Allison. Frank said of their home, "We just never went back in that living room. It was our dream home, and it turned into a nightmare." Andrew Stoddart, Cassie's brother, says the tragedy affected the rest of the family about the same. We all had different things that bothered us. It took us years before we could even talk about it.
Just moving. I thought it was going like this. I thought it was joking, like, yeah, it's a joke. They're trying to, he's trying to spot it or it's not fake at all. He said, we have to kill her. I can't believe I did this. And he said, we have to kill her. And so we stabbed it out of the way. And then he just kept, I heard it go in. I heard his chest, like, pound on his chest. It was supposed to happen. It was supposed to be a joke.
Next, we asked Brian if he ever discussed with Tori what they would do if they ever got caught.
Nope, I never talked about those things, never thought about those things.
We're going for a high death count.
We're not going not to get caught, Brian. If we're going for guns, we're just going to end it. We're just going to grab the guns and get out of there, kill everybody, and leave.
We're going to make history. We're going to make history.
For all you FBI agents watching, man, you weren't quick enough.
You weren't quick enough and you weren't smart enough.
We are also taught that things like killing people and other thing is wrong. The only thing that it's wrong about is because it's breaking the law, and the law's only wrong. The law
Natural selection, dude.
Because
Natural selection. That's all I gotta say.
there should be no law against killing people.
It's hard to believe that Brian and Tori didn't talk about what they would do if they were caught. As an interrogation, both boys gave similar and rehearsed answers. They both initially told investigators that they left Cassie's house to go see a movie, obviously trying to set up an alibi. Of course, with movie tickets, eyewitness accounts placing them at the theater, and their matching statements, detectives would have to let Brian and Tori go, wouldn't they? But the wannabe serial killers were unable to provide them with any of that, and they didn't even have the foresight to look up a summary of the movie they claimed to have seen.
Where at? Is it the first theater? You guys turn and go in?
I remember.
So what was the movie about? I mean, have you watched most of the movie?
I don't know. Well, there's a girl there, and then I remember. You can't really exactly explain the movie.
When their first story fell through, the boys tried another lie.
So you're going to say that whatever Tori did this night, you did as well?
If with your cars, yeah.
No, I mean...
Yeah, Tori can tell us the same thing when we talk to him.
Yeah. I think he'll come clean to you about the movie.
So what was the purpose of parking there?
We were scoping the neighborhood
Why?
because we were planning to go through cars.
When you say go through cars, what do you mean?
Oh, see the ones that are open, we don't go through any with alarms or that are locked. We just walk by, push the handle, and if it's open, we get in it and steal the gas money or change.
So have you done that before?
Once this year and in 9th grade. That
We're gonna be
sounds good,
murderers.
baby.
Like, let's see, Ted Bundy, like the Hillside Strangler,
No.
the Zodiac Killer.
Most people are more amateurs compared to what we're gonna be.
I just kind of, I don't know. I just kind of assumed I was lost in the moment, and it was just more of a, like what people don't really know is that we had we have been doing this for about 2 or 3 weeks. We've been driving around, and we have been we've been going into some people's houses, and we've been doing these things for a while. There was no death, there was no assaults, and so I had no reason to believe, truthfully, that this night would be any different than the other ones.
Something we wanted to know was if Brian thought he or Tori would have been capable of murder had either of them been acting alone.
I don't really know anything about Tori, and I still don't. I don't talk to him. I see him here, from time to time. When we're amicable, I'm not, rude to him. He's not rude to me, but we have a boundary where we don't talk to each other. We say hi, and that's it. I don't know. I've never talked to him about why he got involved with this. I've never talked to him about what drove him into something like this. I have no idea. He's as much of a black box to me as he probably is to you, but I know that absolutely unequivocally, there's no way this would ever happen had I been alone. There's no way in hell this would have ever happened. And so, again, I'm not blaming it on him, but you have to understand the whole interplay between adolescents and trying to outdo each other and trying to be more cool. And so when you have two adolescent boys who are trying to outdo each other, it's, a crescendo goes into something terrible, and that's unfortunately what happened. And so, no, absolutely not. If had I not met Tori Adamson, this would have never happened.
This answer does beg the question that if Brian wouldn't have committed this murder on his own, would his fantasies have played out in another way? It's quite possible that something more aligned with Columbine could have occurred. Next, we asked Brian if he thought watching horror movies influenced him, and if he believed he would have committed murder without watching them.
Well, I absolutely would not have dressed up in a costume and gone to a house with a knife. Yeah, I think kids actually follow templates of what's there before them. So I think we see a lot of school shootings now because school shootings exist in the first place. I think kids are drawn to what other kids have done before, and so I think why I watched Scream, and I only watched Scream 1 because Scream 1 was set in high school. I was able to put my own life, I guess, into the movie and apply it to my life in a way that made me feel like I was significant. Had there been no Scream, then yeah, I think I would have probably been led down, a different path, but I don't think that movies cause any of these kinds of things. Obviously, I'm not a behavioral psychologist, I'm not a scientist, so I couldn't tell you exactly how it influences people, but I can tell you that it just gives you a template to what you can follow, and so that's what I can tell you. But I think largely it's it's kind of like cops and robbers in the old days when you're in the 50s.
Yeah.
Your kids were cowboys, they had cap guns, and they'd chase around the other friends with cap guns, and they would embody those movies that they watched. So I think that's kind of how it happened. You translate that into modern terms, I think that's what happened here, is it was kind of like play, it was kind of posturing, and it just kind of got, like I said, it just, it's a complicated interplay between us, and it came out as we were trying to outdo each other. And so it was an extreme to another extreme until the extreme, became what happened that night.
Notice how much Brian is stuttering on this answer, and the large spaces here, the deflection to "I'm not a behavioral psychologist." He doesn't seem to want to answer the question. He's not willing to blame it on the movie, but doesn't seem to want to take full accountability for his actions. It's also interesting to note here that while Brian says he would never have gone to the scene wearing a costume and wielding a knife, he doesn't say he wouldn't have stabbed one of his peers. This same point is highlighted here when we asked him if there was anything he wanted to go back and tell his 16-year-old self.
Stop doing what you're doing. You're being a weirdo and you're falling into a trap, and get out of it now. Step out of your bubble. Meet new people. That would be number one, is just meet new people. We close ourselves off to so much that we miss out on so much opportunity. And so I had so many times that I could have hung out with new friends, and I could have tried new activities, and I didn't, because I was so comfortable being miserable, and I was so comfortable in my own little dark room, and the only way out of that is to open the door and just step out and go try new things. And so I was terrified of rejection. So there was a girl I had a crush on, I'm not going to say her name, and instead of going and talking to her, I was so mad at myself because I didn't have the courage to do that I stewed on it, and I got mad, and I got angry, and I got envious of everybody else around me because they had girlfriends. Why can't I have a girlfriend? Well, I didn't have a girlfriend because I was too afraid to go out there and take chances and talk to girls, and you might get rejected. So what? That's life, buddy. So I wish I could just go back and tell myself, dude, live your life, step out of your comfort zone, and take some chances.
Not "don't kill Cassie," but stop being a weirdo. It's also important to point out here that one of the motives mentioned during Brian's trial was that he had an unrequited crush on Cassie Stoddart, and that was why he selected her and her boyfriend. Our next few questions focused on Tori, as he'd been moved to the same correctional facility as Brian. We also asked whether Brian wanted to comment on the book Tori's mother had written. The book, titled The Guilty Innocent, is a take on Tori's role in the crime as being a, quote, completely non-willing and passive innocent party. In her book, Tori's mother wrote, "I asked to see Tori, and Sean and I were led back to the room where he had been interviewed. There he was, my baby, alone, scared, terrified."
Dad, I think we owe it to you at this point to find out what we know at this point. Yeah. And there's just no easy way to tell you this. We do know that Tori and Brian have gone back in the house. Okay. We do know that they murdered Cassie.
Our first victim is going to be Cassie Stoddard. She's going to be alone in a big, dark house out in the middle of nowhere. How perfect can you get? I mean, like, holy shit, dude.
I'm horny just thinking about it.
Hell yeah.
I think where we're different is I was trying to be something I wasn't, and he was trying to have the courage to be who he was. That's what I think it was. And that's why I have remorse, is because I was stepping into a world that I didn't understand or want, but I thought that I did because I wanted to be noticed by my peers and I wanted to feel important. And it has nothing to do with wanting to be famous. Everyone thinks I want to be famous. That has nothing to do with it.
We're going to make history.
I've always wanted to make a mark on the world, so, and this is a good way to do it.
I wanted to be noticed at my school. Like, that's pretty much where my life was at school, and that was it.
It's important to note that Brian's next claim hasn't been proven to be true, and it can't be corroborated by anyone else, making it just his opinion.
So Tori, I don't know. I've talked to him. He got to this institution in 2015 or 16, I believe, and I wanted to speak to him so that we could be amicable and just kind of live here, coexist here on our own. And so I did actually talk to him for about probably 30 minutes, and we discussed that because I actually got a copy of her book. I was actually donated to me anonymously, and I don't know who sent it to me, but I actually had a copy of her book, Guilty Innocent, I think is what it's called, and I read chunks of it. I didn't read all of it, but I asked him about that, and he said, "Well, what would you do? Like, your son's in prison and he has life in prison. Like, what would you do?" And what I asked him is have you confessed? And he said this to me on that day, that he told his mom that he took part in the crime as well, and that he's guilty as well. That's what I can tell you.
Perhaps Tori's mom doesn't believe his alleged confession to her, since she already doesn't believe her son's statements that he killed Cassie, which Brian and Tori recorded themselves on video. Again, there's no evidence of this conversation taking place between Tori and his mother, as this is information only from Brian.
I don't know where he's at in his journey now, if he's remorseful or not. I don't know if he's capable of being remorseful. I have no idea.
An interesting note about this last observation from Brian is that throughout our entire interview, he doesn't explicitly say that he's remorseful about killing Cassie. Instead, only saying he has remorse. The closest he comes is this statement here.
But as an adult and as a man, I've had experiences. I've lived, I've learned, I've loved, and I've made it through it. And I wish so badly that it didn't have to take, a person dying for me to actually understand that, oh my God, like, what am I doing here? But I had to learn the hardest way possible, and I lost everything. And I hate that, like, another person had to lose their life. But it's created a person in me that I never thought I could ever, achieve.
Obviously, however, Brian is not the one who lost everything. He still has his life, his health, his family, and hope for the future. Cassie Stoddard is the one who lost everything the night Brian and Tori murdered her. Additionally, the phrasing "another person had to lose their life" makes it sound more like a drunk driving accident than the intensely planned and practiced thrill kill Brian committed. He also gives an interesting answer to our question about whether or not he thinks he deserves his sentence of life in prison.
I really struggle with that. I don't know if it's for me to really say, because obviously I'm extremely biased. I don't know exactly. It's one of the most difficult questions that I can answer is I don't know what the actual proper punishment is. I would want to believe that society would give children the opportunity to become adults and to receive treatment and to see where they're at after all that has happened. So with me, I spent about 10 years in prison myself, and I was in therapy, and all of that taught me that that I was on the wrong track. And when I reached about 25 or 26 is when I really calmed down, and I started to have a very good idea of who I was. And at the time, I was reading a lot of books on adolescence, and that's actually around the time when adolescence ends. When I became an adult, I understood how much different the adolescent brain was to how I was now as an adult. And so I think that the best course of action is trying to educate kids before they commit crimes. But once that has happened, I don't know what the answer is. I don't want to believe that we should put a child in prison for the rest of his life, because I believe that everyone changes and everyone grows inevitably. I think had I not had therapy and all those things, I still would be a different person just because I'm not an adolescent anymore. So, but it's one of the most difficult things. Other countries have already they've already made up their mind that it's not okay to put a kid in prison forever. So. But America's not there yet, and I don't know if we ever will be, and I don't know if we should be. I don't know. It's one of those difficult things where I just hope that we can educate kids enough before they commit crimes.
We asked Brian if there was anything he wanted to say to you, the viewers.
Oh man, that's really difficult. That's a big one because it's like I don't personally watch true crime. I don't understand the whole thing. So that's why I asked you. I wanted this to hopefully be something that's more educational and inspiring. It probably won't be, but I appreciate you at least appeasing me a little bit. But I don't know. I think that we want to believe that all of us are so different, and I think that at our root, all of us are the same. And I think that the interplay of our DNA and our environment is what creates who we are as we get older. And I think that that it's easy for kids to go astray if they're not taught the right things, if they're not exposed to the right things. And I want people to understand that kids, even if they do horrible things, are only kids for so long, and that anybody, if they try hard enough, can get back into normal life and be normal adults if they're given a chance to. And I've been really fortunate where I've had people who have really cared about me over my time in prison, and they've taken time to help me and to work with me and to understand me and to give me a chance to be a human being. And that's helped me grow and become a human being. And so that's what people need. Is that they really don't need people to hate on them and to treat them like they're an animal in a circus. And that's what true crime does. We all need to understand why these things happened, and we can slowly start stopping them from happening.
With that comes our last and arguably most important question. We asked Brian if he thinks he'll ever get out of prison.
I would love the opportunity to experience life in society again, and to have another chance to be an adult and to not be a child. But at the same time, I understand that I'm living a punishment, and that I don't get to decide what that punishment is. I get to decide how I respond to my punishment. And so there is a very real possibility I will be here until I die. I have to be okay with that. And getting out of prison is so far out of my control that I try not to think about it too much. I try to live a life in here that I would on the outside, and so I try to have a job. I try to help people. I have activities I do, and I want to be educated, so I go to school, and I just want to live a normal life, and that's all I want. And if I get the opportunities, 20 or 30 years down the line to be out there in society as an adult, great. But, if not, then I've accepted that I am in prison, and I'm in prison for a crime I committed, and I have to live with that.
And you feel hurt.
Go ahead. And then,
Overall, Brian seems to know how to sound remorseful, but does not seem to truly understand why he should be remorseful. He comes off as someone who is remorseful for a mistake he made as a 16-year-old that cost him his freedom, but isn't actually remorseful for taking the life of Cassie Stoddart and the pain he caused her family and community. In 2016, a case was heard in the Supreme Court that led to the review of 1,500 cases of juvenile sentencing nationwide, Brian's and Tori's among them. Whether or not this means Brian is destined for an early release is still unknown at this time, and whether he deserves to stay in prison for life is something we'll let you decide. As for Cassie's death, her brother Andrew Stoddart put it best when he said, "It's still a huge part of me. For me, every month of September is one I struggle to get through. It comes in waves, honestly. There's days when I'm fine and others I'll just crumble. We love her. It's always going to be a part of us. Nobody should ever have to go through this."